Hi guys, Black Wolf, and I'm reading part 3 of The False Prophet. So, here we go. I knew Tobias. He might have not known me because I'd come and gone from Galvin's charity orphanage so quickly, but in my short stay, Tobias had stood out amongst the others. He was no ordinary orphan. He had been educated as a child and continued to read anything he could get his hands on. He was given special privileges at the orphanage because it was felt he was one of the few with any hopes of one day making a success of his life. Tobias glanced my way. "You're bleeding." I brushed at the cut-up mark on my cheek. "It's mostly stopped." That was as much concern as he wished to invest. "Do I know you?" "I see you here about 6 months ago." "Yeah, I remember. Locked the headmaster out of the orphanage for an entire night, didn't you?" The grin on my face became my confession. "You have to admit, we ate well that night, for once." "It's not funny," Tobias scolded. "Maybe we don't eat well most of the time, but it's because there's not a lot of food to go around. You gave out a week's worth of food that night. It was a very long, very hungry week after you left." My grip faded. I hadn't known that. We rode for an hour through a lonely plain covered in gorse and nettle. Tobias remarked that he found it beautiful in a desolate sort of way. I saw the desolation, but the beauty escapes me. Eventually it became dark enough that Moss suggested we find a place to stop for the night. The closest town was still Galvin's behind us, rather than anything yet ahead, so I didn't think it should matter too much where we camped. But Mott still took us further ways until the vegetation changed, and he found a small clearing surrounded by tall willow trees and thick bushes. "They're hiding us," I muttered to the other boys. Roden shook his head back at me and said, "It's safer here than out in the open. They're protecting us." Mott jumped off the wagon and began shouting orders at each of us for what to unload from the wagon and where to put it. Mostly blankets and, I hoped, food. I was assigned to remain in the wagon and hand things down to others on the ground. "Afraid I'll run away?" I asked. "Any chance to get here will have to be earned," Mott said. "And I'd say you have a great deal more to earn than the others." He nodded at the second foot near my foot. "Hand me that." Although Connor was the master of our group, Mott was clearly the one keeping our show running. He was no ordinary useless vigil. At least I noticed that he didn't need to ask Connor's permission for everything, and Mott issued orders to And when Mott issued orders to Cregan did as he was told. While we worked, Connor stationed himself on a fallen log to pursue a tattered leather-bound book. Every now and then he glanced up, studying each of us with more than a casual examination, then returned to his book. Cregan got a fire going, and afterward Mott instructed us to gather around so that Connor could talk to us. "Talk to us," I said. "When do we eat?" "We eat after the talk," Connor said, closing the book and standing. "Come, boys, sit." I jumped out of the wagon and squeezed into the edge of the log. Roden and Tobias had dragged near the fire. They weren't too pleased to have me there, but they didn't complain either. Vladimir squatted on the ground. I considered offering him my seat since he was still coughing, but I guess he wouldn't take it anyway. Connor coughed too, although his was the kind that meant to get our attention. The cough wasn't necessary. We were already watching him. "I haven't said much as to why I've collected you boys," Connor began. "I'm sure in your heads you've created every sort of speculation from the likely and plausible to the wild and impossible. What I have in mind is closer to the latter of those." Tobias sat up straighter. I already disliked him as much as Roden, even though there had been far more time for me to learn to dislike Roden. "I can't deny there's danger with my plan," Connor said. "If we fail, there will be terrible consequences. But if we succeed, the rewards are beyond your imagination." I wasn't sure about that. I could imagine some fairly big rewards. "In the end, only one of you can be chosen. I need the boy who proves himself to be the closest fit with my plan, and my plan is very demanding and very specific." Tobias raised his hand, a sign that he'd been educated. At the orphanage I came from, a person only raised his hand if he was about to hit someone with it. "Sir, what is your plan?" "Excellent question, Tobias, but it's also a very secret plan. So what I'd like to do first is offer any of you the chance to leave now. You may leave with no feelings of regret or cowardice. I've been very upfront about both the danger and the rewards. If you don't feel that this is for you, then this is your opportunity to leave." Roden looked at me. I arched my eyebrows in response. He wanted me to leave, that was clear, and I would have stood right then, except for a nagging voice in my head that told me something was wrong, so I kept still. Vladimir raised his hand, not because he'd been trained to, but because it had worked for Tobias. "Sir, I think I'd like to leave. I'm not fit to compete with these other boys, and frankly, I'm not one to face danger, even for great rewards." Apparently the nagging voice hadn't visited Vladimir's head. "Certainly you may leave." Connor politely raised a hand toward the raised a hand toward the wagon. Why don't you get back in there and I'll have Cragen drive you to the nearest town. Tonight? The rest of us have more to discuss tonight, so yes, go now. Go right now. Latimer gave an apologetic smile to us and thanked Connor for understanding. I nodded a goodbye to him and wondered, like I'm sure Roden and Tobias did, if it'd be smart to make the same choice. Connor hadn't said what would happen to the boys if we didn't pick for his plan, nor just how dangerous things might get. Then I realized what my instincts had been trying to tell me. Mott was ahead of us, motioning Vladimir toward the wagon. Where was Cragen? I stood and yelled, "Vladimir! Stop!" But my warning only gave Vladimir time to turn from the climbing into the wagon. His eyes widened as he saw what I had sensed. An arrow whooshed past me and pierced his chest. Vladimir yelped like a wounded dog and fell backward on the ground, dead. With a furious cry, I leapt toward Cragen, who was still partially hidden in the shadows behind us, and tackled him to the ground. Cragen went for his knife at his waist, but one hand still held the bow he used to kill Vladimir. So I got to the knife first. With my body crossways over Cragen's, I started to crawl off him, but Mott lunged at me from behind, and I collapsed face down in the dirt. Cragen took a deep breath, then sat up and easily wrested the knife from my hand. That was probably a good thing. I don't know what I would have done if Mott hadn't stopped me. "You killed him!" I growled, getting a taste of dirt into my mouth. Connor knelt beside me and lowered himself so that I could see his face. His voice was eerily calm. Vladimir was sick, Sage. He wasn't going to get any better, and I think he proved a good lesson for the rest of you. Now you can get up and rejoin the other boys, or you can take the wagon ride with Vladimir. It's your choice. I thrust my jaw forward and glared at Connor, and then finally said, "Suppose Vladimir won't be much company now. I'll stay here." "Excellent decision." Connor clapped a hand on my back, as if we were old friends. He nodded at Mott, who let me go, and added, "I'm sure Vladimir's death is a shock to you, but it is important for you three to understand the seriousness of what we're doing." When I sat up, Cragen's leg brushed roughly past me as he went to lift Vladimir's body into the wagon. Normally I'd have kicked him in return, but for the moment I was too stunned to think. "Bury him deep," Connor said. Still on the log, Tobias was pale and perfectly still. Roden looked as if he were having trouble breathing. My breathing wasn't working any better. It didn't help that Mott had really pressed his knee into my back for the last couple of minutes. Connor's smile was a thin line on his face. "Sage, I believe your question earlier was why we had the meeting before we ate. This is why. So we wouldn't waste our food." His eye passed over to Roden and Tobias. "How about it then? Does anybody else want to leave?" Okay. So guys, look at my next one. It's going to be The False Prince, audiobook part 3. And it's by Black Wolf, and part 4, and it'll be the 4th chapter. Okay, bye-bye.